There's a place in Canada where there are no roads, almost no one can get there, and the cold is so intense that it can freeze almost anything within minutes. It is home to the northernmost permanently inhabited settlement on Earth, where military personnel and scientists live surrounded by massive glaciers, Arctic wolves, polar bears, and a landscape that remains almost completely untouched. But how do people survive in such an extreme environment? Today, you're going to discover Ellesmere Island, one of the most fascinating and inaccessible places in the world. Ellesmere Island is home to one of the northernmost permanently inhabited communities on the planet. Located in the far north of Canada, within the territory of Nunavut, it lies approximately 800 kilometers from the North Pole, an astonishingly short distance considering the vastness of the Arctic. This makes the island one of the closest places on Earth to the top of the world, where people live year-round, in a region defined by extreme temperatures, long periods of darkness, and an almost untouched natural environment. The island's main community is Grise Fjord, a small village surrounded by mountains, glaciers, and enormous fjords. With just over 100 residents, it is one of the most isolated communities anywhere on Earth. There are no highways connecting the village to the rest of Canada, and nearly everything that arrives there depends on aircraft or supply ships during the brief summer season, when part of the sea ice finally melts and navigation becomes possible. Living so close to the North Pole means facing conditions that seem almost impossible for most people. During the winter, temperatures frequently plunge far below zero, while the sun disappears for weeks because of the polar night. In the summer, the exact opposite happens. The sun remains above the horizon for days at a time, illuminating the landscape 24 hours a day during the phenomenon known as the midnight sun. This dramatic cycle between constant daylight and prolonged darkness completely shapes the daily lives of the residents and makes adapting to the environment a constant challenge. Despite these harsh conditions, Inuit communities have lived in this region for generations. Over the centuries, they have developed an extraordinary understanding of the climate, hunting, and survival in the Arctic, learning how to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Even today, many of these traditions remain an essential part of everyday life, demonstrating how centuries of accumulated knowledge made it possible for people to live in such an unforgiving place. The northernmost permanently inhabited settlement on Earth is nothing like an ordinary town. Although it remains occupied year-round, it has no permanent civilian population. Instead of regular residents, the site is occupied almost exclusively by military personnel, scientists, meteorologists, and technicians assigned to temporary missions. This place is called Alert, a small Canadian community that functions much more like an operational base than a traditional town. That means virtually no one chooses to move to Alert to build a life or raise a family. The personnel stay there for several months, or in some cases, for more than a year before being replaced by new teams. This rotation system ensures that the settlement remains continuously occupied without ever developing a permanent population like any other town. The entire infrastructure was designed solely to meet the needs of these teams. Everything was built to allow military personnel and researchers to live and work in one of the harshest environments on Earth. In addition to serving as a military base, Alert also plays a vital role in scientific research. Scientists use the site to monitor the atmosphere, study climate change, and collect data on the Arctic throughout the year. Because this region is among the first to experience the effects of global warming, much of the information gathered there helps researchers around the world better understand how these changes could impact the rest of the planet. Another fascinating fact is that Ellesmere Island simply has no large cities. Unlike most of Canada, where massive urban centers are home to millions of people, there are no major cities on the island, let alone shopping malls, busy avenues, or sprawling residential neighborhoods. The few communities scattered across the island are small, with only a few dozen, or at most, a few hundred residents. This reality is directly linked to the enormous challenges of building infrastructure in such an environment. There are no highways connecting the settlements, nor are there any roads linking the island to the rest of the country. As a result, almost all transportation depends on aircraft, which deliver food, medicine, fuel, and every other essential supply needed to keep these communities running. In places where even airplanes cannot easily reach, helicopters take over, especially for transporting researchers, military personnel, and equipment. During the winter, when snow completely blankets the landscape, specialized vehicles and snowmobiles become essential for any travel over land. In many cases, they are the only means of transportation capable of safely crossing the frozen terrain. This near-total dependence on air transportation means that even minor changes in the weather can have a major impact on daily life. If a snowstorm grounds flights, deliveries can be delayed for days, which is why every community must maintain stockpiles of food, fuel, and other essential supplies. The cold on Ellesmere Island reaches levels that few people can truly imagine. During the winter, temperatures frequently fall below -40 degrees Celsius, and in some periods they have dropped to nearly -50 degrees. To put that into perspective, the cold is intense enough to freeze almost anything exposed to the elements within a very short time, making even the simplest tasks far more difficult than almost anywhere else on Earth. Under these conditions, staying outdoors for too long is no longer just uncomfortable, it becomes a genuine safety risk. Exposed skin can suffer frostbite within minutes, electronic devices quickly lose performance, batteries drain much faster than usual, and many materials become extremely brittle. Plastic objects, for example, can crack or shatter much more easily, simply because they are exposed to such brutally low temperature. Vehicles also require special adaptations to remain operational. Standard engines can freeze overnight if they are not properly prepared for this climate. Engine oils become much thicker, fuels require special treatment, and in many cases, vehicles are left running for extended periods to prevent the engine from freezing completely. Even opening a door or handling metal equipment requires caution, as moving parts can become locked by accumulated ice. The daily routines of both residents and researchers must also be planned around the cold. Leaving a building is never as simple as putting on a coat. Clothing consists of multiple insulating layers, including specialized boots, heavy-duty gloves, face protection, and goggles designed to shield against the freezing wind. In certain situations, spending too much time outdoors is simply not recommended, forcing teams to organize their work into short periods of exposure. Interestingly, the extreme cold also transforms the entire landscape. The air is usually very dry, rivers and lakes remain frozen for much of the year, and snow can stay on the ground for months without melting. Even the silence is striking. With very little vegetation, almost no human activity, and only a small number of animals during certain seasons, the entire landscape feels as though it has been frozen in time. The first impression many people have when they look at Ellesmere Island is that virtually no form of life could survive there. With extremely low temperatures for much of the year, limited vegetation, and long winters, it would be natural to imagine a completely lifeless landscape, but the reality is exactly the opposite. Over thousands of years, a variety of species have developed extraordinary adaptations that allow them to thrive in one of the harshest ecosystems on Earth. One of the island's most iconic animals is the musk ox. Despite its calm appearance, it is a true specialist in surviving extreme cold. Its body is protected by a thick coat of fur known as kivayut, considered one of the warmest natural fibers in the world. During the winter, these animals use their hooves to dig through the snow in search of vegetation hidden beneath the surface. When threatened by predators, they form a defensive circle around their calves, pointing their massive horns outward in a strategy that has remained virtually unchanged since the Ice Age. Another remarkable resident is the Arctic wolf, a subspecies perfectly adapted to life in the polar region. Unlike many wolves found elsewhere in the world, they live in areas with very little human presence, allowing their behavior to remain almost entirely wild. Their white fur provides perfect camouflage in the snow, while their broad paws make it easier to travel across frozen terrain. They roam vast distances in search of food, and rely primarily on hunting Arctic hares and musk oxen to survive. Arctic hares are equally fascinating because of their remarkable adaptability. During the winter, their fur turns completely white, helping them blend into the snowy landscape and avoid predators. In the warmer months, their coat changes to grayish or brownish tones that match the surrounding terrain. In addition to their camouflage, they can reach speeds of more than 60 kilometers per hour, an essential ability for escaping wolves and foxes. Speaking of foxes, the Arctic fox is considered one of the toughest mammals on the planet. Its compact body, small ears, and exceptionally thick fur minimize heat loss, allowing it to withstand temperatures that would be fatal for most mammals. It takes advantage of almost every feeding opportunity, eating small animals, eggs, fish, and even leftovers from larger predators, demonstrating an extraordinary ability to adapt. In some parts of the island, it is also possible to encounter the Arctic's largest land predator, the polar bear. Although it is not found throughout Ellismir, it is most commonly seen near the coastline and on the sea ice, where it hunts seals using highly effective techniques. Its presence is a constant reminder that even in such a seemingly silent environment, the food chain continues to function in perfect balance. One of the most striking features of Ellesmere Island is the vast amount of ice that covers its landscape. Much of this natural treasure is protected within Kootenay National Park, a preserved wilderness that contains some of the largest glaciers in the Canadian Arctic. The park's name comes from the Inuit language and means top of the world, a reference to both its location and the almost untouched landscape that dominates the region. Contrary to what many people imagine, these glaciers are not simply enormous blocks of ice frozen in place. They are constantly moving, although at an incredibly slow pace. Over hundreds or even thousands of years, the immense weight of accumulated ice causes these frozen masses to gradually advance across the landscape, carving mountains, valleys, and enormous fjords. This natural process is precisely what created some of the most spectacular scenery in all of Canada. The region's fjords are breathtaking in scale, surrounded by towering cliffs that rise hundreds of meters above sea level. They were formed when ancient glaciers carved deep valleys during the last ice age. As the glaciers later retreated, the ocean flooded these valleys, creating dramatic waterways that are now among the most spectacular landscapes in the Arctic. Standing in this region feels like stepping into a world that has remained almost untouched by human activity. Unlike many famous national parks where hiking trails, hotels, and tourist facilities are part of the experience, Kootenay-Park has remained almost exactly as nature shaped it over thousands of years. Visitor numbers are extremely limited, and large portions of the park have rarely been visited by people at all, preserving an almost pristine appearance. This isolation has also turned the park into an invaluable natural laboratory for scientists. The glaciers serve as massive climate archives. Layers of ice that accumulated over thousands of years have trapped tiny bubbles of ancient air and microscopic particles from the atmosphere of the time they were formed. By studying these frozen layers, researchers can reconstruct what Earth's climate was like during different periods of history, providing invaluable insights into environmental change and the planet's natural climate cycle. Ellesmere Island is considered one of the best places on Earth to witness the Northern Lights. Its location in the far north of Canada, very close to the North Pole, combined with extremely low light pollution, creates nearly perfect conditions for observing one of the most spectacular natural phenomena on the planet. During the winter, when darkness covers the region for extended periods, the sky often transforms into an incredible display of colorful lights. Unlike cities and more populated areas, where artificial lighting makes it difficult to see the night sky, much of Ellesmere Island remains almost completely dark. With so few human settlements, the auroras appear far more vividly. On clear nights, enormous green ribbons of light can emerge on the horizon and, within minutes, spread across the entire sky, forming glowing curtains that seem to dance continuously. This phenomenon begins millions of miles away, on the Sun. Our star constantly releases streams of charged particles known as the solar wind. When these particles reach Earth, the planet's magnetic field guides them toward the polar regions. As they collide with oxygen and nitrogen atoms high in the atmosphere, they release energy in the form of light, creating the northern lights. The colors vary depending on the gas involved and the altitude of the collision. Green is the most common color and is produced when the particles interact with oxygen at lower altitudes. Red typically appears at higher altitudes, while blue and violet are mainly produced through interactions with nitrogen. Because solar activity is constantly changing, every aurora is unique, ensuring that no two displays are ever exactly the same. Ellesmere Island is also known for another little-known reason. It is considered one of the best places on Earth to search for meteorites. While in many parts of the world, these space rocks can quickly disappear because of vegetation, erosion, or human activity, conditions in the far north of Canada are completely different. The environment preserves these fragments from space for thousands of years, turning the region into a natural laboratory for scientists. Much of this advantage comes from the island's landscape itself. Because the ground is covered with ice, snow, and light-colored rocks for most of the year, any dark meteorite that lands on the surface stands out much more easily. Instead of being hidden among trees, soil, or buildings, as often happens in more populated regions, it can remain almost completely exposed for centuries, waiting to be discovered by a scientific expedition. Another important factor is the island's extremely cold and dry climate. In many parts of the world, meteorites weather much more quickly because of rain, humidity, and chemical reactions caused by constant exposure to water. On Ellesmere Island, this process happens much more slowly. The extremely low temperatures help preserve these rocks in nearly the same condition they were in when they reached Earth's surface, allowing researchers to study their composition in far greater detail. In addition, the island has very little human activity. Since almost no one lives there, there's a much lower chance that a meteorite will be removed, damaged, or destroyed before scientists can identify it. Many fragments remain exactly where they landed, turning the landscape into a massive archive of the solar system's history. However, finding a meteorite on Ellesmere Island is far from easy. Research teams must endure extremely low temperatures, powerful winds, ice-covered terrain, and highly challenging logistics. In many cases, the only way to reach the area is by airplane, helicopter, or specialized vehicles capable of traveling across snow and ice. Even after arriving, researchers may spend days searching vast stretches of land in the hope of finding a single space rock.